we're back with Real Talk, Real People with Deb Loving. We had a interesting piece of a conversation, two parts that I'd like to share that came up. One of them was just some conversation having with Calvin that until this conversation took place today, just among friends, I myself never saw myself having white privilege because of my background and the single parent that I was raised by and our financial struggles. I truly did not see that, and I say that with having a husband who is black, having biracial children until this moment, and there was a sting inside of myself when Calvin said what he said. We were able to obviously talk and regroup and hug it out, but there was a sting, and I'm encouraging individuals that outside of, well, no, everybody, I'm encouraging black, white, and everybody is to allow somebody to prick your heart with a truth that you can hear it from them and feel safe in doing that. It was hard to hear that. It was hard. I'm 48 years old and came to that realization in that moment. And there's still obviously more conversation that needs to be had around it. And then we were talking with Kent, and he brought up such a wonderful point about primal fear. And I was just hoping that maybe he could recap some of that for all of you that didn't get to hear the conversation.
Oh, basically when we were talking, we were sharing that what we're trying to do is get understanding of what's going on. And the example that I had shared was that probably half of our country, the female half, understands what's going on right now when they go to a store, say later in the evening, and some guys come out, could be white or black, doesn't really matter. Mm-hmm. There is a primal fear, a defense that comes up, and that something could happen bad. Even though 99% of the time it's not going to happen, there's still that primal response. And I think we can take that sort of feeling, and that's kind of what black males, kind of feel. Mm-hmm. Even though 99% of the time it isn't necessary, but that initial response, is what we're hearing in the culture right now, that black males feel that. And I just said that women can actually, kind of understand that.
And I think to take it
And
a
then
deeper,
Carlita.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And then
Carlita jumped in from a
Yeah, because you were specifically saying black males,
yeah,
but
that's what we're hearing now.
that pricked my heart because I'm like, that's not true. Because I am afraid whenever I see a cop car.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're on this side and I'm going this way. It doesn't matter if they're parked and there's a possibility that they're coming out or they pull behind me. I know I'm doing the speed limit. I know I'm typically doing under the speed limit depending on where I am, specifically where I work and where I live. I'm doing under the speed limit. I am 75% more relaxed when I'm in the city, period. I am like this when I'm in my area. And the primal, even earlier in the conversation, a white police officer and a black male were having a heightened discussion, and I felt the same thing.
Yes.
I felt the exact same anxiety, even though 20 minutes prior to that, we were all laughing, prior to, the cameras coming on. I felt the same anxiety sitting here, knowing that they are respectfully having the conversation, but it didn't change my feelings.
Right,
Absolutely.
exactly.
My primal instinct was, I know Calvin a little bit better, and Kevin seems amazing, but this could go left. As safe as this place is, Deb mentioned they were all believers, but I had the same anxiety, and that's probably why I didn't really say anything the first half, because I was processing.
Amen.
It's all right. And that rawness right there is what we need to heal. And I think it's very important that we are able to feel that. Because even as she was expressing herself, I felt that not only as a black person, but I felt that as a Christian. And that we have to get to the point where we can feel for each other on whatever level we're on, just so that we can accept those feelings as her feelings.
Right.
And not denounce them, not diminish them, but allow her to have those feelings in a safe environment like this. But then from here, how do we move forward so those tears are become power? That one for her.
And I felt like in that moment when you and Kevin were going back and forth and just conversating, like, I don't know what I was gonna do, but I wanted to, like, you know, I wanted to hug you, I wanted to protect Kevin, and you didn't need my hug and you didn't need my protection. But that was what was welling up in me. And I think that how can we share that heartbeat with everybody? How, you know, can we speak to the idea of just that realness that, you know, CJ just showed? How can we, as believers, because every last one of us here love the Lord with all of our heart, and we know that He has saving grace and saving power and mercy. And, you know, I can't go into specifics, but there was a time where I know without a shadow of a doubt that it was God ordained when Kevin called my phone and was like, hey Deb, I have a situation here. You know, this is what's going on. It had to be God ordained. For him to be in that place that he was at with the other individual that I, you know, can't name, God ordained. It was nothing but a God intervention. And how grateful I was that it was him that could intervene in that moment. And, you know, one of the things that we were talking about is, you know, like the nation's heartbeat. How you felt our heartbeat, right? You felt the adrenaline going. You know, Kent came in with a voice of reason about the bell curve and how this idea that, you know, white people or any person of privilege thinks that, you know, prejudice and racism is all over here and it's just in this small little bubble and it doesn't exist. But then he also went on to say that, you know, there's this whole other arena that it's not, and if anybody understands like a bell curve, it's just like this big bell that goes down. And so from the black perspective, racism is right in the middle and it's this huge piece, and then it doesn't afford for what is being presented in this arena. You know, and I guess I was hoping that maybe we could speak to that. Like when you hear the nation's heartbeat. I watched a movie that was called King in the Wilderness, and I'm not going to go into it, but it was a movie about Dr. King and the man behind the name, the man behind the title. And there's a statement that was going around Facebook that Dr. King felt like he had led his people into a burning building. But if you watch this movie, if you watch this documentary, you see the man, not the pastor, not the husband, not the father, not the political leader, but the man whose arms and shoulders were so heavy that I believe it was that part of his humanness that said, I've led my people into a burning building. Because there was a piece in that documentary that said he wanted to go seek mental health help, wanted to go see a doctor. And his political team said, you will be massacred if you go and you seek help. There's no way in hell. Sit here, suck it up, work it out, we'll counsel you. They're not counseling him. They're feeding him the political agenda pieces. They're not thinking about the man's heart, right? And so here it is all these years later, and when I'm watching, like, you know, the marches and watching everybody come together and, you know, the camaraderie that's there, but also what you're seeing if you watch the marches from the 60s, you see a few white people there, but look at the marches now.
Yeah.
Look at the voices. Look at how everybody's coming together. Even today in an agency-wide meeting, we had a council that said, you know, I understand I'm white. I understand that I have white privilege. And I sat there like, who she got? I have none, but she does, right? Right. And I'm like, you know, how blind can one person be, you know? But even she said, I just want to know. I want to know how I can hold hands with you, how I can hold hands with you, how I can hold hands with you. How do we do this together? And I think that that collective voice will reach the people who can make those large political decisions. You know, I'm not the judge, but I wanted us to be the voice today that said to any individual that hears us, don't give up and don't be succumbed to your bitterness and your anger, and don't get all the way to the finish line and just fizzle out. This is not the time, right? We have knocked the enemy in the back of his head, and now it is time for us to take ground. And Danny, I really wanted you to speak to the idea with Danny having the military experience that she has, the divide and conquer. Because I really think that should be our next piece into divide and conquer and how we do that as believers.
Right. So typically you hear divide and conquer, and the initial response that people have is, okay, well, we'll divide our team up and we'll conquer. But that's the opposite of what it is, because there's strength in numbers. If I'm stronger with two, even from, two or more, where two or more are gathered, if I'm stronger with my brother, my sister next to me, why would I send them over there and send me over here? Well, now I'm more fearful over here because I'm by myself. There's nobody to watch my back, my six. So the idea of divide and conquer is be strategic and find a way into the enemy's camp and divide the enemy and then conquer the enemy.
Amen. And so today I think it's very important for everybody to hear that, I am not the enemy. Danielle is not the enemy. Kent is not the enemy. Kevin is not the enemy. There is, Calvin's, Carmita, they're not the enemy. There is an enemy, and he is real. Let that not be a fooling to anybody. And we are seeing, very large signs of the times. There is a heavenly shift that needs to take place. There is a heavenly council that needs to move itself into this physical atmosphere. And it's only going to happen when we unite all the voices together. My heart broke. My heart breaks. I can't stand to see CJ drop a tear. But I connected in the idea that this is an individual that walks around all the time. Happy Monday, happy Tuesday, happy Friday. How are you? Can I get you some water? It could be somebody else's client in the lobby. So can I get you some water while you're waiting? Would you like a snack? She's always there. So for me to know that fear resides in her, because I never get to see that fear. I never see it. To know that it's there, now I can address it. And that's what I'm kind of just, now that we know what divide and conquer is all about, our nation's heartbeat, I just really hope that all of you will take a minute to speak to it, speak to the individuals and especially to the young people. Those millennials have so much power, if they would just tap into, join hands, come together, and finally they have something that they can sink their teeth into and have a real cause to fight with and together, as opposed to fighting against, anything that's opposite of what they think,
I think there's a huge master plan that God is really working on. Kevin was talking about it earlier, and Ken chimed in as we were just conversing. And I think that we as believers, we have to trust that God is orchestrating a bigger plan than we ever know of. And there's nothing new under the sun. You see the riots back in the 60s, the riots way back when, you see the civil rights movement, all of those things, and you see mirrors of, or reflections of that today. But there's greater degree of, and like you mentioned earlier, the white presence. And I'll say this, one of the jokes or the conversations that go on a lot in the black community now is, we can step back and let white folks fight. Because you see them on the front line. But until we see that connection, no real change is going to happen. And so that just simply means not that we want you all to fight for us, or we want whites to fight for blacks. It's just stand up with us and help us fight. And so we link up, right? And so, and going back to Dr. King, going back to all those things, until people start linking up. And they always linked up in prayer, they linked up in spirituality, and their minds were like, we may not praise God the same way, we may not shout 5 times and do a dip, it may not be the same type of worship,
right,
but we all are true in the sense that we serve a true and living God, that we're now seeking a greater path of righteousness, and it all starts with us. That I can sit next to a Kevin, I can sit next to a Deb, I can call you my sister, I can call him my brother, even after just meeting him, and there's no ill will. And I appreciate the conversation that I'm able to have with him, because now I understand where his background is. And then we're able to move forward in a spirit of peace. and I don't have any animosity. But next time I get stopped, I want to call him.
Everybody have Kevin on speaker.
Right.
We got him on FaceTime.
I helped you out of the first 5 tickets. I can't do anything with the 6 tickets.
I'm calling Kevin. Siri, call Kevin.
But you know,
FaceTime him.
Okay.
Siri's trying to.
Oh, wow.
it's on silent.
It doesn't matter.
That's what Siri
does to me all the
You talk to Siri.
Good job.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to all of the audience that he has said Siri. But I mean, could anybody like would you mind speaking to like when you see the nation's heartbeat, you see your heartbeat. How do those two go together?
For me,
Yeah.
my heart's broken. My heart is literally broken. You know, seeing devastation of lives, seeing devastation of society, seeing devastation of property. I mean, this country is just, I've never seen it. The last 4 months, I haven't recognized this country. You know, and my heart is broken from the very beginning. You know, and it's a sincere broken. It's prayerful broken where I'm like, God, you know, heal our land.
Yes.
Yeah.
Touch us.
Yeah.
Touch us in a way you haven't touched us before.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Which literally means that the heartbeat of America is off rhythm. And so that's powerful to hear him say he's heartbroken. Because we as Christians, as believers, all should be heartbroken.
Yes.
And what do we need to do the next steps in order to mend those broken hearts? Because when we literally, as the world watched that 8 minutes and 46 seconds of the heart wrenching, everyone clenched their own heart because you literally felt the intensity of that. And the demise of what has happened since then causes the heart to break even more. And so we felt every mother, every brother, every sister, we felt the pain of America, and it was literally more than we could bear.
Yeah. Yeah. It's even hard to
Talk about.
yes.
And
to talk about
the
it,
ironic
not
part
let
is-
the tears fall.
We normally run to the church, but since the church has been closed,
Yes. Come on now. Tell me that wasn't an attack again.
now that the church is closed, from the building perspective,
Yes.
we had
Have
to
to be.
run and we
Yes.
had to be
Yes.
the church.
Yes. Yes.
Within our walls,
In the
and
middle of
our
a
worship
shout.
worship had to change to a different perspective,
Yes.
because now we had to understand the trueness of God's
Yes.
presence.
Yes.
And if He's omnipresent, He wasn't just in the building.
Yes.
That happened on the street.
Yes.
And so when we see the turmoil on the street, now we're advised that now we have to take that inward and we have to begin to become worshipers.
Yeah.
So
And
you're
we have to
almost
worship.
saying that it could have been a positive and not just a negative.
Oh yeah.
Because the the building was closed, but the church wasn't closed,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So people had to come together
Yes.
in a different way.
That's why I think it's
And you see
strategic,
it.
because God is a lot. It could have happened anytime, and then it was right after this pandemic, and then it's all this stuff going on. But I think strategically, God is calling us to a different level of worship and a different level of Christendom. That we're not just sitting in a building waiting on it to open on Sunday or whenever worship is,
Yeah.
to where you say, "Hey, okay, God, I got my complaints," or all that stuff. But now we become worship.
I think that's why
Yeah.
the young people, I came back from a conference last year in Tennessee, and one of the statistics that he gave is that there was 82 or 83% of children who were raised in the church moved away from the church. And one of their biggest things is that they felt that the church was too judgmental in areas. It didn't leave room for that didn't look like Christian or didn't act like Christian or you don't fit the mold.
Right.
Human nature.
And so, yeah, at first I'm like, look what the enemy did. But what I heard Calvin say is like, look what God did. He said, I'm gonna shut down this brick and mortar. And I'm gonna have you put your money where your mouth is. And are you gonna bring back the Billy Grahams that were on the street corner with a Bible in their hand and wearing a suit? And that was a representation of Pathways. A lot of people are like, you're open, you didn't close, you're open. No, we did not close. We did not close our doors. We weren't gonna close our doors. And our clientele went up. And what we found is that people wanted to be seen in person. They're like, I don't want a computer in front of me. I need a real person. I'm
Right.
scared to death. Will you be here for me? Right? And so we had to put our fear away and do what God says do and be there for my people.
Yep.
So yeah, that's huge.
That is
That's
huge. That's
powerful,
huge,
you
yeah.
know, powerful.
Yeah.
Just powerful.
We also have to remember who we serve and what he said. Jesus said, love your enemy
Yes, he did.
and pray for those who spitefully use you.
Yes.
And when he said that, it's a bumper sticker now, but back then, you were dealing with an oppressive, totalitarian, brutal, unfair, and all those other words you could put in. People, when he said that, his audience had to be going, are you out of your mind? Excuse me? And we have to remember, and Dr. King, it was love. They're gonna do fire hoses, they're gonna do the whole 9 yards, but we are not gonna respond in kind. And we have to make sure that as Christians, that when there's so much fear, because fear tends to lead to actions that aren't, productive, we have to get back to our roots and what our Lord called it. Love God, love your neighbor. Those were the two biggies. And really, we've been discussing about loving our neighbor.
Yeah.
We are charged as Christians, every color, red and yellow, black and white, as Dr. King said, Reverend King, to love our neighbor. And now we want to, how do we do that? But we have to have a heart to do that.
Yes.
And I think the millennials are a good representation of that because they have a tendency of not seeing what the average person sees.
Yes.
And their love is a little different, well, it's a lot different than how we were taught to love. And I'm dating myself, but when they love unconditionally, which I think we're, and going back to your point, that when you take those points out, or I don't tell me how to love, just let me love. And I think we as believers, we need to love differences, love opinions, love and respect each other,
Yeah.
but move forward in the kingdom agenda, serving God together.
So we are winding down on our time, but I would like for everybody to have the opportunity to answer this very last question. And I'm just going to give you a quick little rundown, little story about where this question came from. So Chloe, if you're listening, Miss Deb is putting a shout out there for you, big girl, because you're about to change the world with this next statement. So Chloe, for everybody understanding who Chloe is, she's an amazing little girl, and she's 8.
Wow.
So she had asked her cousin, who is at U of M, working on a college level degree. So this 8-year-old said to her, "What is the carbon footprint that you want to leave behind?" 8 years old. What is the carbon footprint that you want to leave behind? And so I would like everybody to take a couple minutes to, and whoever wants to go first, but when you think about your position, where you're at, where you're going, the things that you've seen, the things that you have seen and I have seen. One of the things that I've always found so hard is that I have told my husband and all of my friends that are Black specifically, is that I will never understand. I won't. I want to walk alongside of you as closely as you will allow me, but I will never know what it is like to lay down at night and be Black and wake up and be Black. And the closest I ever came to it was a time when my husband had lost his job. We had 5 young children, and he laid his head in my lap that night and he cried. He's like, "I will be the token, but I have to be able to take care of my family." I think that's the closest I ever came to understanding what it was like at a various moment. And I'm not saying every Black person's life is filled with that disparity from minute to minute to minute to minute, but I can't ever really understand that piece except outside of my experience as his wife holding his head. And so I just, my carbon footprint is, to be the very essence of my last name. And that's to be loving. I think that's why I was so taken back for a minute, because I'm like, I love you. What happened? Where did you go? You're my brother. You left me.
But I didn't.
No. And then I'm like, wait a second, you're talking to my brother over here and I love him, so I want to encompass my family. I love all of you. And so if I leave any footprint behind, it is the essence of love. How my mission, I feel like that the Lord has put on me, is to teach others how to love. And that comes with a heavy weight because sometimes it's hard to love an enemy. It's hard to see what one man would do to another man and have to find, I can't use natural love. I gotta use God's love and I can use the power of prayer to help me fill in the gap. But that's the carbon footprint I want to leave behind is love. So I just would love to hear from you guys.
I'll jump in. He hath shown me, O man, what is good and what doeth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with thy God. That's the footprint that I want to leave.
I'm staying on this side. So we talked about the marriage and family component. My sub-passion is families that have been affected by incarceration. And so my ultimate goal is to offer conferences that allow people to hear each other, allow people to see it from the other person's perspective, and to walk away changed, to walk away different, to walk away feeling like, one, I'm not alone, because that family looks different, but similar experiences, and walk away feeling like they have an opportunity to help make sure that another family doesn't experience the same thing.
If I can say this without crying. I want mine to be about motherhood. I feel, for those of you that don't know, I work predominantly with children, and I don't know that I'll ever have my own baby. And if God doesn't want me to, that's fine, but I want to love the babies that can't be loved, that feel rejected, that feel unloved. I want to be a mom to those who didn't get to have their mom or their dad. I just want to love God's children.
Amen.
God's children.
Yeah.
You're already doing great work.
Thank you.
Mom.
I think my footprint would be able to be good husband, good dad, and I want to help others to have solid marriages because so much of what we're seeing, when you drill down, there's so much that love, acceptance, guidance at the roots on both sides, but in a lot of cases, wasn't there. And I have a real passion for strengthening marriages so that we can have healthy kids that are loved and can love others because they're coming from a strong
Yes.
bond, and that's really my passion.
I'll share your carbon footprint.
I guess my footprint that I would care to leave is that my voice made a difference as a light or beacon of light in darkness. For so long I would shrivel to even hear my own voice. But now I understand that my voice is not necessarily what's heard verbally or audibly. Many times it's what's heard from the heart. And so if my heart can touch another person's heart and bring a smile on their face and add some lightness to their world, then I think my job has been done in that season of living.
Well, all of you, I want to thank you so much for being willing to, like I said in the beginning, to have this conversation, not really knowing what direction it would go in. I think that even in the conversation we showed how to love one another, respect one another, have differences, and where we can come together. I hope that maybe we can have some more conversations like this. I think that they would be wonderful to have, because there's so many topics that I think that together this group could really cover and really make a difference with. So today, this was Real Talk, Real People with Deb Loving. We came together, we blended our voices, we knitted our hearts, we joined our minds, and together with you, everybody watching, we will ignite the power of the Holy Spirit. And we will see the change that Dr. King once talked of. We're seeing it firsthand. We see a unity that was only spoken in a dream,
Right.
right? But that dream's becoming a reality. Be encouraged, stay strong, reach out, do not stay alone, and don't mask your tears. If you need to cry, cry. And if you're angry, it's okay to be angry, but the scripture tells us be angry but sin not. And the way you don't sin is to reach out. So until we get to talk again, this is Real Talk, Real People with Deb Loving. Thank you all for being here today. God bless.